HiSec Buyback offers 90% JITA anywhere in HiSec. Simply go to hisec.evebuyback.com, appraise your items, create a contract, and get paid quickly.
Welcome to Talking in Stations. This is Sunday, 27 November 2022, with myself, Nick Bison, and CSM 17, Kenneth Feld. Appreciate you being here, Kenneth.
Welcome to Amateur Hour at Talking in Stations here, where Nick and I are muddling through this to try and bring you guys a show.
What we're going to kind of look at today is we want to talk industry. Hasn't been done in a little bit on here, and so we figured we've got the two farthest extremes of industry happening here. Me, the little tiny guy, and then we got Kenneth on the other side, which, for lack of a better term, is going to be the hyper big. And the changes we've gone through, where we came from, where we're at, and just kind of, how it all happened. Kenneth, you want to take through just the beginnings of the history of this? Oh, could you hear me?
Yeah, hold on. I was hearing you through. No, I can only hear you through the Twitch, not through
your mic anymore, or your headset?
That's
Like Kenneth mentioned earlier, this is a bit of an amateur hour, but we'll get this straightened out.
okay. I'm good now. Yeah, when I changed from the green room to recording, it turned my headphones off.
Ah, okay. What I was asking is, to kind of start from, the history of the massive industry changes we've run into, which I guess started all the way back at the end of 19 with scarcity, and then the phases we've gone through to where we're at.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, sometime around the end of 2019, they started basically pulling back. There was just one little blurb, and they removed Veldspar and Spod from all nullsec, and they reduced the amount of asteroids that were in the anomalies by roughly 50% across the board. Some were a little bit more, some a little bit less, but they basically started pulling back on the amount that people could hoover every day. And then these are the nullsec or anomalies that just instantly respawned. They put timers on them and this kind of stuff, but basically, if you had enough systems, the ore was pretty much infinite. And then you had ore coming from moons. So they took the standard ore away from the moons as well, but they didn't touch moon goo. They left moon goo alone. They just removed all of the standard ore off of moons and really cut back on the resources across the board. And then they did a DNA change so that basically all the ores, what you got from reprocessing was all different. And that was kind of the first part of scarcity. And that was just simply due to, since the age of Rorquals, there was just, people had so many minerals piled up in their hangars that it just, nothing mattered anymore. Like, oh, I'm going to go out, I'm going to lose 200 dreads. Yeah, no big deal. 5 minutes later, here's all your new dreads. Have a nice day, right? So there was no downside to losing them, essentially. Well, then they went completely to the opposite end of the spectrum, where you start this scarcity thing, and although you had your stockpiles you could replace them with, it would take you about 47 years to mine enough to build another dread. So you had what you had, but that was all you had.
There was also a huge, when they announced that scarcity, it was a little later, when that huge last minute building bust hit before the change on the caps.
So that was in April of 2021. The devblog came out in March, and I think there was 4 weeks, might have been 5 weeks. It was fairly quickly, but it was done on purpose that they were going to change the reprocessing, and they were also going to change the bill of materials, or how you build capitals. So capitals were now going to start requiring whole gas. They were going to require R4 goo. They were going to require composite goo. They also changed the general composition of the capital components from being titanium heavy down to pyrite heavy. So, and this was it was kind of funny to a certain degree, because CSM kind of knew the next step, but we didn't know 2 or 3 steps ahead. So when the first change came out and titanium was only going to be available on high-sec, everybody's like, oh my God, all the null-sec groups are going to have high-sec people just to mine the titanium for them so they can build Titans. And then by the time the second domino fell, then it was like, oh, no one needs titanium because pyrite is the new source. Oh, pyrite comes from nullsec still a little bit, and R4 moon goo. Oh, so we're good. So then it was the next, I don't even remember what the next thing was. It was always my hair is on fire because of X, but it was all transitory. So anyway, back to your point, during this April of 2021 change, it basically put scarcity onto the blueprints. It was nearly impossible to build anything bigger than a battleship, period. Across the board, I mean, you could do it, but it wasn't worth it.
Oh, it was horrendously expensive. And
Correct.
from your side, it was still possible, but it was now got really expensive. From my side, who I was kind of making a fair living off of bowheads and orcas in high-sec, that came to a screeching halt because I can't get everything I need within my little core anymore. So I needed to start looking for outsources. So how much did that hit you?
It did, but it didn't. So we'll stick with the freighters, because the freighters and the jump freighters were special snowflakes, because they go boom so much, right? So when it first came down, of course you couldn't build them, just like the bowheads. You just couldn't build them. But because there's so much ganking going on, the reserves got used up quickly. So they were the first things to turn the corner, and you had to build fresh ones at the new price just because people needed them. I mean, there was a couple days in JITA where there was less than 10 jump freighters for sale of all 4 races combined, right? So people had to build them, and they just charged what it cost them to build. I mean, the price went up, and that was just the new price of doing business. And they kept getting exploded because you still have to use them. People get caught on gates, war decks, whatever, or ganking, and that was the end of it. Now, as that started, I think you kind of fell into your new role in the industry. You started looking around like, hey, we have all these new blueprints and we have all these new things we have to do. Yeah, people aren't building this stuff up here, but people are still building the stuff down here, and you still need this over here. And oh, by the way, here's this new thing over here. Wonder what that's about. And kind of go through your process of how you looked at that and how you overcame and adapted there.
Well, in my particular case, I looked at it and went, there's just no way it's going to be profitable for me right now, even with Orca, cap components, and bowhead BPOs researched all the way out for this to be profitable because of acquisition of material. And I looked at it initially and I'm like, well, let me let this play out. And because this affects battleship and up pretty much, I just went from battle cruiser down, and then all the warships that I, non-bowhead and Orca on that side. And that became my initial focus. I was one of those folks that did have a pretty good stockpile of minerals, but the need for specifically the ore ships turned into a little bit of a cash cow for me. Even though I'm still mining my little R4 moon, that was a side action at that point, and just producing, you know, because with the state of HiSec, you're always going to need mining barges. So that, and along with the, oh, they just lost the porpoise, is another good seller, because they're out there, they're used, they're not that tough to build, and you know, so I just basically had to adjust how I did things. That, and then move more to a ice mining off of my regular, used to be belt mining and moon mining, still do that, but ice for fuel blocks. Fuel blocks are just a good seller with all these other folks plopping down little Athenors in HiSec.
Did you ever get into making any of the parts that came out or at doing any of the reactions? Or was that a little outside of your reach due to having to go to low sec?
Yeah, overall, out of my reach. I did buy all the freaking blueprints and research them up because I just can't help myself. But my initial and thought was this is going to open opportunity of my R4 moons selling the well, later on compressed, but initially the goo to different bigger builders. Well, that really was kind of a pie in the sky. But what that did open up is for the mid to smaller builders that are actually working in low sec groups already. That became an avenue to sell off my R4, and in exchange here and there would be the parts I want in order to build an Orca again. So kind of a little bit not as big of a relationship as I initially thought I was going to get, but there's a couple of the smaller groups that deal in null that have little reaction farms that this has worked out fairly nicely.
Good, good. Okay, so now we're kind of moving on a little bit. That industry change came, and we both reacted to it. Basically, I shut down other than Tech 2. At the time, it was just, build more Munins, and, that was it, pretty much. So then you get around, and we're coming up on the end of 2021, and all of a sudden, hey, there's a mining rebalance coming out. Well, what's this mining rebalance thing you're talking about? Oh crap, Rorquals are getting nerfed even more? Oh man, oh, that's the end of the world. But all these shiny barges that haven't been used since prior to the age of the Rorqual are all getting dusted off again, and people are trying to figure out what skills they need to fly them and how they can shift from Rorquals to mining barges. And all of a sudden, the old Hulk roared up again, and Green Skin or whatever showed up. I don't know. You and I probably remember the original Hulk TV show, but they they became top of the heap, right? So
Once
and the
again,
Mackinaws were quite good as well. All of them got a huge buff, and the reach on those things and the throughput, because you don't have the speed of the drones to deal with and this kind of stuff, they all became monsters overnight. Oh well, we have all this newfound mining power. Well, but there's no ore out there. Oh, wait a minute, everything's going to be doubled. Holy crap, so there's going to be twice as much of everything. Oh, but now there's this wastage factor that's getting thrown in there. Oh, that's going to be the end of the world. Everything's going to go to waste. We're not going to have anything left for anybody. Oh, the world's ending again. And that was kind of the third domino or fourth domino by this point, whatever, I don't know. Some domino in the middle that that fell, and it was the next ending of the world, which happens about every year in Eve for something.
Well,
And
with that they changed the blueprint scheme on crystals, which I think was one of the nicer changes to where I didn't no longer needed, you know, every ore type. I can just get by in high sec with the ubiquitous for moon ores because that's all that's going to be available up there, and the same for some of the common ores.
it took me, I would say, the better part of 3 months to get that pushed through. All of the CSM was for it. And I don't want to put too many words in their mouth, but I don't think a lot of them fully understood what I was trying to do, but they weren't against me. They couldn't help a whole lot in certain areas.
Well, I
And
think a lot of them probably hadn't been out in a barge mining a field with, half a dozen different types of crystals in their hold. And what a pain in the backside that turned into regularly.
and also on the production side, and that's just for the established players. For the new players coming in the game, the skills to use the crystals and, oh, I'm mining Veldspar in this belt in high sec. I just got my fancy new retriever. Oh, I want to mine Scordite, and oh, that's a whole different crystal. Oh, okay, back to training again, right? And like you said, now pretty much all of high sec is covered under one group. You train that group and you can use any of the crystals. The other thing that people probably don't remember from the Wayback Machine is if you were mining in high sec, or you mining anywhere really, and you had a crystal in for Tritania or for Veldspar, and then you switched over to Scordite, all it did was mine incredibly slow and destroy your Veldspar crystal. It didn't it didn't it didn't tell you, hey, you got the wrong crystal, dummy. Now they put in the checks that if you have a Veldspar crystal and you shift over to a Scordite rock and you hit the F1 button to try and mine, it says, nope, sorry, wrong crystal. So now there's a check there and you can actually change the crystal and get your full yield, and you also don't destroy the crystals prematurely by using the wrong crystal and the wrong ore and getting very little ore in return.
Well, that and with the wastage and the types of crystals, A, B, and C's, a lot of folks were very concerned about that. And so, naturally, because I'm a nerd, I went out with 4 different Mackinaws, one with T1 strips and then 3 with T2s with A, B, and C in them to actually see what it's going to mean to my particular play style. Where it settled out for me is, a lot of folks like the B. You get a higher yield, it's very nice, short time. I like the A's because when I get to play, I've got the time and I want to get as much as I can. So I'm willing to spend a little more time with a little less wastage and a little less overall yield. And that's just my particular play style. A lot of the folks I'm mine with bring B's because they like, getting it more now because I've only got an hour. I need to get out there, get what I can, and move on. So that wastage has not turned into the nightmare I thought it was going to be initially.
Yeah. I don't know if you remember those shows of me trying to explain math to people. And also too, the wastage came out and it was one thing, and then a week later it was basically totally turned on its head, and then the numbers shifted a couple times, and the math involved in that was absolutely chaotic there for about a 2 week period. But I think you're right. In the end, all it is a little squiggly line on a graph, and no one even thinks or cares about it anymore, other than the only thing I really hear about it now is, oh, it's a bad mechanic. Okay, I don't get to decide the mechanic or the names of stuff, right? It was shoved down our throats. We get what we get. We try and make the best of a bad thing. And as far as it taking ore off the table or anything like that, I think it's mainly just a squiggly line on a graph. The only time most of the null set groups are 64s are pretty much A types only. Other than that, most groups allow A's or B's, and a lot of it depends on how often you mine. Like if a moon pops and you only have 48 hours to yank it, then if you got X number of people and they have to pull X amount an hour, and B's still won't get you to mine out the moon, then use B's and get what you can get, as you were saying, as opposed to leaving some there on the tree when the tree goes poof, right? So it's more of a finite resource versus a abundant resource. If you have something that's abundant, just use B's and get what you can get. If as you get closer to the finite side of it, assuming you have the time, then kind of A's are the answer.
Yeah, one of the things I did on my little moons is the stabilization rig give me another
Mm-hmm.
24 hours. So instead of 48, I got 72 hours to get it. That
Yeah.
keeps me using my A's, lets me invite friends over, that maybe don't work, that their time frame they can play is a little different. So that
Right.
works out. And the other change on the wastage, if I remember correctly, initially wastage came out before you got your ore, and that got flipped to you got your ore and then the wastage took effect. And that actually made calculating what you were doing a little easier as you're watching.
What it did is it made the last bits of ore not an exercise in hitting F1 over again. So once you got down to the last couple hundred units, as you scrolled around, if say you were down to 100 units and you were going to get 200 and wastage is going to be 40 or something, if the 40 came off first, only 60 would end up in your cargo hold. Now the whole 100 would end up in your cargo hold, and there would none left for wastage. So that was the main reason for that. It did clean up a lot of the other calculations. That was kind of like a good side benefit. But the big thing was at the very end of the moons or very end of the rocks, it made it much it made it less disheartening for people who got a full cycle in and poof, the rock went, nothing went in their cargo because everything went to wastage.
Yeah, one of the folks in chat there is asking if the C type gives a suspect timer, and I'm almost positive that answer is no.
Yeah, it was supposed to at first. I think I really don't. Suspect timers is one of those things that the the way that it happens isn't. I don't know. I don't know what I can say about it, but it's not as clean as, oh, just give someone a suspect timer. So, but Type C crystals are being used even more than I expected them to be used. There is quite a bit of how do we say this nicely on a clean show? Screw you, jerk, and deleting a bunch of ore. I was really surprised when I saw some of the initial graphs for the C type usage.
Oh, that would be interesting, you kind of seeing that on a graph, because I was looking at it as a semi offensive or denial tool that folks could use.
Right.
And I didn't think it was going to be that prevalent outside of let's screw their industry over so we can take over this area.
Yeah, they're a lot more prevalent than what I thought they were ever going to be. I don't think the monthly economic report, it only shows the graph of just how much waste there is. It doesn't show the actual breakdown of the crystals, but it's the actual breakdown that the CSM gets to see is a lot more than
A
I
little
expected.
more
We'll just leave it at
refined.
that. Yeah, yeah.
Fair enough. Fair enough. All right. So where'd we go after that? When they started loosening up, they added more ore back in. We got
Right.
crystal changes.
Oh, one other thing I want to talk about too, the two things that go along with that is the initial changes to the Porpoise and the expedition frigates were lackluster at best. and I lobbied hard. And I said this from the get-go. I wanted the Porpoise to be day tripping, wormhole, gas like support ship, right? That's the way that I saw it. They're nimble, they're decently quick. It's a good ship for that. And so the Venture, the Porpoise got the gas compression module and got bonuses. I mean, that to me is, you get a group of 4 or 5 guys with a Porpoise and a couple Ventures, or I forget what the other names of the expedition frigates are, but
Endurance and something else.
Prospect.
Prospect, yep.
Yeah. So you get a couple of those, you can go in a wormhole. You can, for a high sec group that delves into the wormhole for the day, you can make quite a bit of ISK just pulling out the gas. And I buy a lot of gas from those groups, the high sec groups that just go into the wormhole for the day type thing. Now it's certainly risky, but if you lose everything, you're out, 100, 150 million ISK. I mean, it's not like it's a great loss there for the return that you could possibly get out of it, right?
Yeah, if you lost the whole fleet, Porpoise and 4 Ventures, that's 150 tops with fittings. So
Right.
yeah, you're not in a bad space, because if you supped up the gas available, you're damn near going to have that in your hold leaving the area. So
Right.
a couple of successful trips in a wormhole, and you're looking fine.
Yeah. So that was the one change. The other change was the industrial jump portal that allowed the Rorquals to bridge and or portal jump a group of mining ships. That's been asked for forever, and that was probably one of the most looked forward to features. I'm like everybody else. I'm sorry it got delayed a month, but the reason for the delay, I don't know if I can talk about yet, but it was definitely necessary. They couldn't make it work as is, but in their defense, they did it right, and it's not a dead end feature anymore. We'll leave it at that. So
Is it getting used? I mean, is it
oh my God, yes. At least in nullsec, holy crap, is it getting used? Yeah, because now you don't have to bring Titans out. You can bring, so like when PL mines, we mine out of a Sadio and out of a Keepstar. Keepstar's no big deal, but to log in my Titan and put on a Sadio over a weekend when we have a lot of barges out, people are hunting, just not the safest thing in the world. But instead, I can just undock my Rorqual and bridge people off the Rorqual, and you get 10 light years instead of 8. I think it's 8 for a Titan, whatever, off a Titan. So you get more range. And on top of that, if you have your own little group, you can just jump them all over with the Rorqual and then bring the ore back in the Rorqual and either jump that back and forth or whatever. And it also goes to an industrial Sino instead of a regular. So there's a lot of advantages there for that.
We kind of didn't miss, but we kind of glossed over the whole compression coming in when, when the changes were made to the industrial command ships and we got compression added in. That can't be overstated how huge that was to folks, the smaller mining groups in high sec all the way through null.
Well, let's be clear. Compression's been in the game for quite some time. The compression that got added was moon compression and gas compression, but the compression generator, which allowed every single mining ship in range of the generator, which this took quite a bit of lobbying as well. The range of the generator matched the range of the bonuses pretty much within half a kilometer or so. So that if you were getting the mining bonuses from the support ship, you also got the compression bonuses from the support ship. So every Hulk, Mackinac, Retriever, Venture, whatever, could all compress on board. And like you said, that was a gigantic game changer, and it was instant compression. Yes, a window pops up. Sorry. But
Yeah, but I'm not,
instant
you know,
compression.
for the small group that only has, like, say, a single orca, but they've got 3 or 4 barges or 5 barges out there in that little core. They're filling that orca up, which then has to go empty every 30 to 45 minutes. Now that bad boy can sit out there as long as it's got fuel, you know.
Right. And if it's really bad, you could probably send one hauler out and load up that hauler with 25K, and that'll last you another, what, 6 hours or so at least.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's the because, like, with an orca, it's roughly 16,000 units of heavy water. That'll last roughly 2.25 hours easy.
Yeah. Well, you can, okay, so maybe you don't know this. If you have heavy water in your cargo, it'll still pull heavy water out of your cargo. You don't have to have it in the fuel bay.
Oh, I've always been moving it to the fuel bay. I never didn't know that. All right.
Yeah.
Good safety tip.
Yeah. So, yeah, if you just, yeah, it will not pull from your fleet hangar, but it will pull from your cargo. And it does the same thing on the Rorqual. So Rorquals would go out with 184,000 back in the old days in their cargo bay. You would siege up in a POS back when they covered the whole system, and you could do it at login on like a Saturday morning. Log in, make a fleet, and turn your POS shields off so no one could come in, and you could boost the whole system all day, and people could join and leave the fleet, and they would get boosts all day, and your worker would run all day off the heavy water in the cargo. So yeah, and that works for the porpoise as well. So as long as your heavy water is in your fuel bay or in your cargo bay, it will continue to draw from it.
Yeah, the porpoise cargo bay, little tiny. It's not gonna. Yeah, but that's all right.
Yep. Yeah. So, and that's just part of it, and managing that. I mean, it is what it is on the porpoise and the orca because they can't jump anywhere. But for the Rorqual, you've got fuel in there for jump fuel and for bridging now, or portaling, whatever you want to call it. So yeah, that was a gigantic game changer. Not only did it change for the people on the gathering end, it also made it significantly easier for the industrialists to gather that ore from the people who are to I don't want to say gather, because people
shipping it from place
shipping
to
it,
place.
yeah, exactly. It made it much, much more efficient to ship the ore everywhere. And instead of refining it in high sec and just shipping the moon goo, which was really, really small, now it made it to where you can ship the ore and refine it in null sec at a much higher refine rate, because they did bump the refine rate by 2% in null. So
yeah, because in high sec, the most I'm getting with a perfect refiner is roughly 78%.
And I get 90. I think it's 90.6, something like that.
So, and that's a hell of a difference. That's
absolutely
worth shipping the compressed ore out to be done.
Right.
Much better.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And that's part of how I live on my margins, right? If I buy the ore from people who mine in high sec like yourself, and I buy it based on a price that's set by the reprocessing in high sec, and then I reprocess in null sec, then all of that difference between the two reprocessing rates minus my shipping is all profit over and above what I make on the profit of doing what I do with the material.
Yep, I like that. That's a good deal.
Okay, so all the mining changes are done, and now we need to start building again. So right around April, I think it was April of 22, almost a year to the day where the doomsday industry changes came out. Now there's been a few tweaks to industry, but they've been kind of minor. But now the new industry comes out, and it basically turns everything on its head again. and there's quite a few changes across the board. And all of a sudden, hey, you know what?
You can
I can
build
build a
capital.
few, yeah, I can build a few things, and it doesn't kill me, and people can actually afford them to a certain degree.
Now
So
there was a lot of changes at that point on what the capital components needed, wasn't there? That made that doable again.
no, it was what we would call a BOM, a bill of materials. So if you looked at a dreadnought before and you counted the number of capital components it needed, it would be significant. And all they did was cut it down to about half of what it required before. So the price basically not quite halved because capital components are only a percentage, but they also tripled the output of the auto integrities and the life supports and reduced their volume and a few other things. So basically, dreads came down. I'm, I, I, I don't know what all's been said publicly because that's been almost a year ago now. But I'll say it like this: the dreads were made to be the cheaper ones, and then carriers were the next, and then faxes were the next expensive, in that order, kind of. And the dread price initially dropped significantly, and I was building them for about 3.1, 3.2 billion just to press buttons. And now that number is right about 4 because the demand on the materials has gotten so high, especially with the new Navy dreads coming out and stuff now, that we're starting to reach the equilibrium, right? So that was April of 2022. It is now November of 2022. So what, 7 months later? And we still haven't reached equilibrium. The good
Now,
news is,
for some of the folks that may not be in the loop, so to say, can you kind of explain what you mean when you say equilibrium?
so equilibrium to me is if you look at a JITA price and the amount that you pay for the materials is pretty much steady over time. So when the change came out in April, there was little to no demand on the materials because no one was building. Well, then there was a little spike in demand, so the materials went up slightly, but it was still livable, right? And then summertime came and a lot of the dreads that were on the market from before all gotten scarfed up. So now a lot of the sales were based strictly on building. Well, builders need to build to sell those. So then the pressure on those resources started going up. Price went up. Well, everybody's like, hey, this is worth more now, or I'll gather this today instead of that. So there was some shifting of what people went after when they went out to gather and make ISK. So then certain things reacted. There was also a bug now that's fixed where some of the chemical labs wouldn't respawn properly and stuff. So some of the drops were kind of for lack of a better term, they were bugged. And but that's kind of returned now. So a lot of that stuff is that the gathering is starting to steady out or at least reach a plateau. Now, can it go higher? Certainly. If there's a run on, I don't know, Galente parts or something like that, I'm sure that people in those space will kind of shift what they're gathering to gather a little more in that. But then they threw these Navy dreads in the mix. Well, then the demand went through the roof almost overnight for all the same parts because to build a Navy dread and a regular dread, it's the same identical parts. It's just a ME0 BPO or BPC. So the demand kind of shot through the roof. So stuff jumped up about 10 or 15%. And it's going to take a while to kind of people to gather more and kind of bring it back down. I don't think it really reached equilibrium before because it was still slowly dropping, but very slow, but still slowly dropping. And we were
Well, a
probably,
good chunk of that is, would you call it like the early adopters? I got to be the first one to have that Navy Dread. So
oh,
big push on that.
oh, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, there was, and the fact that they're good, right? I don't know that you're ever going to see a nullsec group with 500 of them anytime soon, just simply because the blueprints are so hard to come by. But for certain applications and certain uses, they're incredibly strong. So I think you'll see them. I think a lot of people wanted hanger queens or be the first in their corp, whatever, to have them. So there was some of that. But I think there will be long term demand for these things for sure. And that long term demand, in addition to the demand for the regular dreads and the carriers and this kind of stuff, is all returning. At the counts of number of people logged in, I'm looking right now, there's like 27,000 people logged in. We haven't seen that high of a number in months. So more people logged in, more demand for ships, more people to mine. All that stuff has to reach some sort of equilibrium to where I can look at a price today and look at a price the same day a month from now, and they're pretty close. And so far, since April of 2022, that has not been the case, really. Stuff is still moving. Now, some of it's been external, like, all these new blueprints put in the game, but nevertheless, stuff still isn't static yet or at equilibrium. And the Tech 2 stuff is still dropping because there's a lot more moon goo out there. And so there's still some other things happening in the market that are affecting industry, but by and large, stuff is still moving considerably on pricing.
Now, one of the folks in chats, Edel, I believe it is, mentions, he's saying, well, wait, the blueprints are not that hard to come by. All right, take that as opposed to you saying they were hard. Where I understand that is he's saying they're not hard to get, they're farmable. I think what you're saying is, yeah, but there's not a lot of them yet. Is that an
Right.
accurate statement?
Correct. Yeah. I mean, I would buy 350 to 400 of them. And I mean, right now I see like 10 maybe on contracts, and I don't know anybody that has 400 million loyalty points laying around that would sell them to me. So, it's not that they're not available, they're just not available in a quantity that's needed for a large nullsec alliance to make a fleet of them.
Okay. Another interesting question, which we kind of slid over earlier when we were talking about some of the changes, but was non-watch asks, how much did Moongoo demand drop with hack nerfs when they I'm going to say rebalanced as opposed to nerf because I'm Galente and we never get buffed. So
Actually, Moongoo demand for me has gone up because all I did was, well, I don't know if I want to say it yet, but well, hell, we're gonna have them out soon. PL retired Munins close to a year ago now. We haven't used them, but what we have been using instead is EOS and Vultures. And then we just came out with Sleipnirs to replace the Munins, which is basically just a gigantic, tankier, more DPS Munin, slower, obviously, but it requires a lot more moon goo. And I just used a ton of moon goo this morning because I was asked to build something else. So I think you're going to see more demand on the moon goo as people build new ships because they're not going to replace the Munins and the hacks with, assault frigates. They're going to go up the chain. And as you go up the chain, it uses more moon goo. At least that's what I'm hoping. I know that's what we're doing. I don't know where other groups are going to fall out. So I'm kind of interested to see. It's kind of happening now. People are starting to burn through their Munin piles, and they're going to have to make some decisions. and I don't know where a lot of the groups have made their decisions yet.
Just looking over the chat there. Do nothing. Okay, Moongu, let's say Munion's apparently pretty good in the Abyss. Out of my experience base, I'll take your word for it, Highbrand.
Yeah, the whoever Eteli, I'm not sure. Yeah, the Allegiance system should be coming soon. It was delayed from the initial launch, and once the Allegiance system comes, instead of the whole corp or the whole alliance having to join faction warfare, just one pilot can join. I'm really looking forward to when you have a high-sec corp and you have a Galente faction warfare allegiance guy and an Amar faction warfare allegiance guy, and they're both in the same corp and they meet on a mining op or something. Are they going to be allowed to shoot each other and pod each other in the same corp, even if the that switch is for the aggressive is turned off? How is that going to work out? I think it's
Yeah,
going to be
especially
quite
because at the core level they've got friendly fire enabled or disabled. If it's
correct.
disabled, they're technically at war with each other at an
Correct.
individual level. It'll be interesting.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm kind of, and I don't know the answer. I purposely have not asked as CSM because I want to kind of see how it shakes out. I'm kind of interested in that one. So, but I think that's going to be quite a neat little feature coming in there.
We've seen with the allegiance system getting a heck of a lot closer. A lot of null groups are looking at the different factions going, let me jump in on this a little bit. We've had some movement from a couple of the larger groups that are siding one way or another. And, one of the casual remarks is, is null so boring you're going to come into low sec? The counter to that being, could be a lot of damn fun.
Yeah, there is a couple null groups that have. I think there was something on Reddit that Horde sending a SIG. I would expect Goons to send I think they call them SIGs too. I'm not sure what they call them, but a group down there. I know I heard that Test joined Caldari, but
Either Caldari or Lente, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm not a meta type of guy, so I don't know all that crap. But there are some groups that are supposedly joining the militias. I'm not. I'm sure it's a cash grab of some sorts because the idea of quick ISK, especially something that's new, they think they can push some people around and make some quick ISK. And if this system, as CCP's kind of hinted, that this system that they're using with the front lines is something that they could see gravitating to other areas of space, then maybe they just want to try it out and see how it works. So that if they see it in some other areas, they may be a little more prepared for how it works.
Okay, yeah. One of the folks just confirmed over there. Testas, Caldari, the Siege Green folks went to the Amar side, and Horde is on the Minmatar. There's somebody that jumped in on the Caldari, or excuse me, Galentian. I can't remember who.
Yeah, the guy that says that one corp left from Horde, I'm not sure if that was in addition to the SIG or if they were the SIG or how that all works. But I know that there was a group that was going, and it may have been the SIG and the corp are kind of synonymous, and so they just left as a corp. But I would imagine there's still going to be some more involvement across the board from nullsec in this area.
That should be kind of fun. A lot of the faction war folks, they're used to, fights on the, 5-on-5 through 30-on-30 size.
Yeah.
When a 600-man SIG shows up, that's a different scale.
Yeah.
Not to say, I mean, we all know Snuff will third party in on something in a heartbeat, which they have done quite recently. So,
hmm Yeah, it's going to be, the little groups are like, oh, yay, faction warfare. We're getting some love. Hey, where the hell these 3 fleets of nullsuckers come from? you know, they're eating our bacon and stealing our biscuits, and is what it is. If you make the rewards worth it, people are going to figure that out pretty quickly, and they're going to go try push button and take bacon for themselves.
yeah, like you mentioned earlier, a bit of a gold rush initially. And a
Yeah.
lot of them with and I'm not too sure how the whole heraldry thing is going to work, but what's that about?
Heraldry is not going to have anything to do with faction warfare per se. Heraldry you're talking about allegiance. Allegiance is faction
Allegiance,
warfare.
sorry, yeah.
Heraldry is the pretty stuff on your ships with your corp and your alliance logo and that stuff. But the allegiance, yeah, I'm extremely interested in that because I have a couple guys in my high sec industry corp that are quite capable of shooting things, and but I'm not going to put that corp in faction warfare. I mean that's basically suicide for the corp, right? So, but if my 1 or 2 guys that can shoot stuff want to go join and shoot people, then allegiance is my way in.
You know what? That
So
very well is going to be my way in too. Because I've been approached and been talking with a number of the different faction warfare groups. Galente only, by the way, because that's the only one that matters. The rest of them are trash. And that's always the thing: is okay, which characters do I move? Do I need to come out of my core? Just all the little peculiarities.
yeah, it's there's going to be some definitely changing times coming up for sure. And again, I don't know how all this is going to shake out. I don't have a crystal ball. But at the end of the day, if there's 27,000 people online on a Sunday afternoon instead of 20,000 people online, I don't much care what they're doing as long as they're doing something.
And having fun. I mean, that's the bottom of the name of the game
I
on that.
I don't even care if they're having fun, honestly, as long as they're just there. No, no, no. I kid. No, I mean, obviously, if you're not having fun, you're just going to hit the little X and see you in a couple months. Let me know how it works out for you. And I think that's why we got down to the player counts that were so low. Now that a lot of the, for lack of a better term, housekeeping stuff and all the industry stuff is kind of packaged with a bow on top. There's still some corners of the wrapping paper that we need to cover over and make pretty, but the large box of doo doo that we had to endure for 2 years is, you know, over there in the corner, safe. Now they can get back to making stuff that 92% of the player base cares about and wants to do.
I know this is something that even if you knew the answer, you couldn't say. But one of the initials on scarcity is reduce the stockpiles.
hmm
Whether it has or hasn't, I really don't care at this point.
Yeah,
But
it did for sure reduce the stockpiles. Now, to me, the scarcity is not what did it, but the second industry change where they changed the DNA. I'm sorry, the first industry change when they changed the DNA and the BOMs, and we had that 5 week window there. That was the highest index that my system had ever been. And I was building in 3 systems simultaneously to jam through as many dreadnoughts as possible prior to the change. I had roughly, and I even enlisted help from guys in PL because this was a little too big for me to even handle. And we consistently had on 32 to 3,500 jobs simultaneously to try and jam through as many ships as possible to burn up the stockpiles before we had to start adding the moon goo and the gas and all this stuff. So that did more for the stockpiles than all the scarcity stuff.
Just literally the threat of the change. Even if the change
Correct.
hadn't shown up, stuff's been used. Interesting. Interesting. One of the folks is Teal again says faction warfare nice for industrials. All those ships destroyed. Yeah, and for us little high sec guys, that's a lot of battle cruisers and below that we can build rather easily to help replenish. So that you're right. It even though it's not in full swing yet, I've seen it change in my area of just what I want to try and sell off.
Right. And a lot of those ships are smaller, like the frigate areas and stuff. To me, that is the large use for assault frigates and that kind of stuff for those small complexes. Nullsec uses them a little bit, but I think faction warfare uses them a lot more. There's a large group of faction warfare that only flies frigates and just does the small complexes and that kind of stuff. So a lot of the use case, and I've seen the volumes in JITA go up on those ships simply because of that. So much so that I'm probably going to start making them in high sec again.
Yeah. Oh, slight transition. I'm going to take a quick look at the chat, see if there's any questions in there. But prior to the show, you and I had talked briefly about some of the third-party tools out there. Some of them that are pretty accurate, some that haven't kept up with the changes, and your thoughts on what'll help somebody right now.
Yeah, I think they've all kept up on the changes. The only one I don't know about is Eve ISK per hour, because I've never used that one. Well, I can't say never. I've tried it, but I never. It just seemed like it was pulling teeth the whole time to try and make it work. So I'm not saying that one's good, bad, or otherwise. I'm just saying I'm not familiar enough with it to talk about. But a couple of the big things that I want to talk about, the two big ones that I use are the Lazy Blacksmith and the Eve Cookbook. RavWorks is also another very good tool that's used. And also Fuzzy Steve and Lazy Blacksmith's site are both very similar. The main difference is the Lazy Blacksmith site will save my settings. So that's the main reason I use that. And the same with Cookbook. I kind of wanted to go over why some of the changes are different, but I mean, it's already been an hour. We definitely don't have time for that. We may have to save that for another show, or we can tease it coming soon or something where we can just basically talk about the third-party tools. But they are getting very, very good. They will really help the new players muddle through a lot of the industry stuff. And not any one tool is the super tool, which is also nice because everyone has a place, but the tools are very much GIGO. You remember that from when you were a kid? Garbage in, garbage out. So you have to be able to read the tools in order to get the information that you need to build and make ISK. And
I happen to have RavWorks, Lazy Blacksmith, and Eve Cookbook, and I just posted the links in chat for the folks that haven't seen those before.
Yep, perfect. Yeah, that's definitely the three that I use. And like I said, Fuzzworks also works really well. The one thing about Fuzzworks is, well, I don't know if it's still like that, but you used to be able to mouse over the little industrial symbol and it would tell you what type of facility you needed to build it in. I'm not sure if it still does that or not, to be honest.
I'm looking for my copy of it right now, and I don't see it on my my cheat sheet section.
Here, I got it up. So let's see, industry tools, blueprint calculator. We'll do something, we'll do a Munin because I know that's going to be a special one. Nope, it doesn't anymore because you can build anything anywhere. Yeah, so it doesn't come up anymore. But still, they all those tools definitely have a place. Use the ones that you're comfortable with. But the next show that we have, where you see Nick and I, and this is something that both of us want to do a little more of, and we can go into how Nick does his industry and how I would do the same thing, and then you get a kind of idea how a smaller operation would do it and how a slightly larger operation would do it. And then maybe if you're in the middle, you take a little bit of one, a little bit of the other. If you're a big guy, then you want to be a big guy, you maybe look at the differences in how you would need to grow to go from a small one to a larger one, that type of thing. But it's something Nick and I want to do more often, and we need to make it work somehow.
And
But
if you've
hopefully
got,
there'll be.
oh, I'm sorry for interrupting, but like for the folks that are industry related, feel free to, chat us up in the TIS Discord if you have a particular area or topic you'd like us to go into a little more. In addition to what we're going to do, we can always definitely look at that.
Yeah, for sure. And keep an eye out because I have quite a bit of time off between now and the end of the year, and so there's a lot of things I wanted to cover, and CSM got in the way a lot of it, just because there were so many things I couldn't talk about. But now that I'd say 95% of that is over, we can get back to the basics now. We've gone kind of through the history, and then we can move on to where we are and how to build certain things, how to use the tools to match what you see in game, and how to kind of build efficiently. I am not going to sit here and go over, hey, you need to build whatever this ship this week because you make ISK on it, because that's crazy. By the
Well,
time
that
that
also
the show
changes so
comes out,
rapidly.
you're screwed.
Yeah, that also changes so rapidly. Now, something I had asked you about before, on the stream when we were just yakking, and this being your third time on the CSM in a row, you can't run this next time. Do you have any personal Kenneth Feld objectives between now and the end of your run that you're allowed to or would be comfortable telling us on?
Sure. Well, like I said, cleaning up the last bit of industry. There's still a few tweaks that we want to do to kind of clear up I guess for lack of a better term, pain points. There's still a couple areas that I never liked from the get-go, and now that it's I don't want to say maintenance mode, but it's the heavy lifting is done. The few things that cause the most pain now, there's a few tweaks we can do to reduce that pain, but still keep the complexity. And so I'm going to try and get those done. We have a summit in January this year. So it's the first time, this is my third year on the CSM. CSM 15 and 16 did not have a summit. We didn't even have a virtual summit. So this will be my first summit in Iceland. And I'm looking forward to that. And a lot of that is going to be forward thinking because it's going to be in January. And, they've already announced some stuff that's coming out in December. So obviously that's already done. So what you're looking at for January, especially now that FanFest is going to be next September, I would imagine that a lot of the stuff that we're going to talk about in January, there'll be hints of it throughout the late spring. And, FanFest will be the big reveal for a lot of the stuff, and it'll be a fall release. I don't know for sure, That's the reason I can talk about it. I'm just guessing based on the timeline. I mean, anyone with half a brain could look at the timeline and figure out, oh, if there's a summit in January, that's kind of how stuff would work. And so I imagine a lot of the stuff that we'll talk about will be coming out later in the year. And obviously, elections are going to be April, May, June timeframe. And so my information will be cut off after that. And I'll have no idea how it's morphed. I'll kind of have an idea of, what they're going to touch, but how it gets morphed and that kind of stuff, I will know nothing about that until I hear it at FanFest like everybody
Right.
else.
And that the September FanFest 2023, that's 20th anniversary action of Eve.
Correct.
So I'm anticipating some big reveals because we're talking 20 years. I'm actually going to stick a crowbar in my wallet and try and make it to it. So, 'cause I've been playing long enough, I figure I owe myself one.
Yeah, this McBeggar in chat about the multiple jobs at one click. Dude, I've been asking for that since 2014, the day after the industry UI came out, and that will not happen. They do not have the infrastructure to do those calculations. Even if you look at that Eve cookbook, if you try and put in that you want to build 20 dreads off of, or even 10 dreads off of one BPC, it will time out on you an error. The most you can do is about 5 dreads off of one BPC. And that's just because of the run calculations that it needs to do for that. That it's just not set up for that. I would love it. It would be super nice. The same thing with stacking BPCs. The calculations and the checks that it has to make sure that they're all the same and stuff. It's just, yeah.
It's one of those quality of life that looks good on paper, but in practicality, it'd be a major obstacle on the programming side and the database side even more because I'm more familiar with that.
Right. Yeah. It would be nice. It would be awesome. I get it. Maybe one day we're there. I didn't think we'd ever get to the point where we have elite skills now that allow 15 clones, right? No one ever thought a third tier skill would come out, and they're here. No one ever thought that you would have multiple clones in a station, but that's here as well. So never say never, but right now it's not ready for prime time.
All right. Any final words at the end from you, Kenneth?
No, it's just this was fun. Definitely want to do more. So stay tuned. I have a bunch of the stuff queued up on the third-party tools already, so I'll keep that up. Next weekend I'm traveling, but I don't know if you got time midweek or something. And we're always on TIS Discord. Both of us are, and hopefully we'll be able to build on this a little bit.
Yeah, there's an industry sub-channel in the TIS Discord, and we frequent, hell, I live there. But yeah, pop in, say hi, tell us to screw off, give us ideas for what you'd like to see in the show side, and what we're allowed to talk about. That'd be fine.
Hey, one answer here to Ness. The changes to T2 ships, I purposely had them put it in one of the end of the year updates because I know what you're talking about. They said that changes to T2 ships are next or something like that was in one of the blogs, and that was actually a lack of a better term, a misprint. And one of the end of the year update blogs that was put out specifically said in there that T2 industry is fine and they don't plan on touching it. And as far as I know, that is still the answer.
All right. Once again, hey, appreciate everybody coming by and hanging out with us. Once again, see us at the TIS Discord or in space. Get out there, have fun, and take care, everybody.
And the bad news bears made it through a show. Woohoo!